What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. This is part 2 of the legendary Henry Armstrong. One side note. During the course of my conversation with you, you're going to notice my voice skipping. That's part of the complications of a illness that I had during the beginning of the year. I've been dealing with this. Part of the complications was I lost my voice. And the doctors didn't think I would ever speak again. And with hard work and determination and faith, I was able to get my voice back. At first, I stuttered when I spoke. But I got rid of the stuttering, and now my voice continues to skip. But I will speak more fluently as time goes by. And that's why I have not done any videos in some time. I want to thank those who reached out and thought about me and gave praises and comments on my son, who actually is got a scholarship to 2 different colleges through wrestling. He's been wrestling for just 3 years, and he's beating guys who've been wrestling since 7 years old. Ranked number 3 and number 2 seed. And he's got probably about 80 medals now. He's 84-3 was his record. So those who showed him love and appreciation, he reads all the comments. He knows all who reach out to him, and he wants to say thank you. Now we're looking at Baby Arizmendi. He was a Mexican and California featherweight champion. He would take on Henry Armstrong, and Armstrong faced him August 4th, 1936, and he would become the California Mexican featherweight champion. They fought 6 times. Armstrong won 3, and Baby Arizmendi won 3. The first time Armstrong faced him was August 4th, 1936, and the last time he faced him was in 1939. It would be for his defense of the welterweight championship title. Amazing. Baby Arizmendi of Mexico. He would become the California world featherweight champion on October 18th of 1932, when he would defeat Russians Empires, Newsboy Brown in Los Angeles, California. In front of 7,000 spectators, Baby Arizmendi was a ball of dynamite. In fact, one of the first fight films I've ever seen was Baby Arizmendi and Henry Armstrong. Henry Armstrong would defeat Alton Black September 13th, 1935, in Chestnut Street Arena. And it was to be recognized as the Western featherweight champion. They changed that to the California state championship title. So Henry Armstrong had more than just 3 championship titles. He had 5. The Mexican and the California. Those were state championship belts, but they were recognized almost as a world title because, of course, that was the only state that had it. So Henry Armstrong will be champions in California and in Mexico as well. But he would defeat Alton Black. Who was Alton Black? His name was Alton Wiley Black. He was a southpaw. He stood 5'5". Fought from 1932 to 1937. He had 208 rounds of boxing experience, 33 professional bouts, fought 126 pounds during the course of his career. He was born in Fort Lupton, Colorado, lived in Reno, Nevada. He was a very good fighter in his day. On October 29, 1937, California Mexican featherweight champion Henry Armstrong would become the NBA New York SAC featherweight championship titleist. And he would become the first Black American world featherweight champion, who was to stop pt2, making him the second Black fighter in any weight division to become a world champion in Madison Square Garden. Now, he was the 3rd fighter to do so, but he was the 2nd universally recognized champion. Why did that happen? Because pt2 had the New York SAC. But when Armstrong entered the ring, the NBA would now be on the line. It was vacant. It became vacant because Mike Belois was stripped of his title. So when they stripped Mike Belois of his title, that belt then became vacant. It was available for Armstrong and Peter Cerrone to fight. That was not only the historic event that took place that evening of Armstrong becoming the third black featherweight champion to win a title in Madison Square Garden, but the second black fighter to be universally recognized as a champion in Madison Square Garden, behind Theodore Tiger Flowers, 1926 against Harry Greb. But Henry Armstrong will be the first black fighter. In fact, he was the first fighter, along with Peter Cerrone, to fight under Mike Jacobs' promotion in the New Garden. You see, Jimmy Johnston had ran Madison Square Garden. But then Mike Jacobs would take over. And his first championship promotion was Henry Armstrong and Peter Cerrone in Madison Square Garden. I want you to pay close attention to all of the accolades that Henry Armstrong would have. Now, this was featherweight. But he had to give up that featherweight championship title just a few months later because he had the audacity to move up in weight class and take on Barney Ross, one of the greatest welterweight champions in boxing history. Barney Ross also happened to be his stablemate. They had the same manager, Eddie Mead. Barney Ross would have 3 outstanding fights with the great Jimmy McLarnin, who was the babyface assassin. Barney Ross would take on the Fargo Express, Billy Patrol. Many, many others, Tony Canzaneri. Barney Ross was a great, great fighter. So when you win a title, it's who you take the title from, when you take the title from that fighter, and how you take the title away from the fighter. Armstrong took the title from Ross just a few months after he would win the featherweight championship title. And then after defeating Barney Ross, he would go down to the lightweight division. Why did he do all this? Joe Louis, and I explained that in the first part of the video. In this case, now he was the heavyweight champion. Took that title from Jimmy Braddock in 37 in Chicago, Comiskey Park. But black fighters didn't corner the market. Joe Louis was the second black heavyweight champion behind Jack Johnson. Johnson won that title from Tommy Burns, Sydney, Australia in 1908. And when he lost in 1915 to Jess Willard in Havana, Cuba, there has not been another black heavyweight champion until Joe Louis came on the scene. Joe Louis began his professional career in 1934, and he won a title in 1937. So Henry Armstrong would now pick up the featherweight championship title. He would hold the welterweight championship title, as well as the lightweight championship title. It was only 8 divisions. Armstrong owned just about half of them. So now you had a black featherweight champion, a black lightweight champion, a black welterweight champion, a black light heavyweight champion, and a black heavyweight champion in 1938. The only weight division that didn't have a black champion was the middleweight. There was a reason for that. So between Armstrong and Louis, they cornered the market. This is what makes Henry Armstrong my 4th rated fighter, the greatest to ever do it in boxing history. I have him ranked number 4 of all times. You got to understand, at that time, black fighters didn't have that opportunity to do what Henry Armstrong actually did. And when he tried to go up in 1940 to defeat Seferino Garcia, who he defeated in 38, and win the middleweight championship title, he was robbed from that opportunity. Now, I don't go by what a fighter didn't do because he wasn't allowed to do or what have you. I can't document that part of his accomplishment, but I can put it in his legacy. Because it was an act that took place on his watch. Armstrong would have been the middleweight champion, and he would have had 4 title fights. Now, he wouldn't have been universally recognized as middleweight champion because the New York SAC did not recognize a 10-round fight. Therefore, they had to move that bout over to California because they would not put Henry Armstrong in the same ring with Seferino Garcia if both the New York SAC and the NBA title was on the line, because Armstrong already defeated Seferino Garcia. When Seferino Garcia fought Henry Armstrong in 38 in defense of his title, which you have to understand. Barney Ross would become the welterweight champion. There was an agreement with Eddie Mead. Barney Ross would face Seferino Garcia, providing Garcia lost. And that's what happened. But they didn't know that Henry Armstrong would one day become a welterweight champion. So when Seferino Garcia became the middleweight champion, Ross was supposed to get a second shot with Garcia. In this case, it would have been as a middleweight. But Armstrong defeated Ross. So Armstrong was next in line to face Garcia. Garcia's camp did not want Armstrong to face Garcia for the middleweight championship title because they knew he would lose. So they wanted to make it a 10-round bout. New York SAC wouldn't recognize the 10-round bout, so they had to go to another state. Here comes California. Armstrong was bribed and offered money to carry Garcia. He refused to carry Garcia. He refused the money. So when they set up the match, you normally would have 1 referee and 2 judges. Well, in that match, they conveniently had 1 judge and 1 referee. And that referee and judge, jury and executioner, was 1 man. That man was not a certified referee, although he refereed a bout or 2. And his name was George Blake. He was a trainer. And they put him in the ring to make sure that Armstrong did not win that bout with Garcia unless he knocked him out. So immediately he would take away 5 rounds, not points, rounds away from Armstrong. When you cut 5 rounds in half of a 10-round bout, you automatically get a draw if that man even wins the rest of the round. And which is what happened. Armstrong won the remainder of the rounds, and it became a draw. Blake ran out of the arena, tried to catch a cab, got caught, testified. And that's how we know today what actually happened. They didn't reverse the decision. They kept Garcia as champion. But as I say, Armstrong would have not been recognized universally as champion because the SAC was not on the line, only the NBA. That's part of the legacy of Henry Armstrong, so we must understand that. So Armstrong could have possibly have been a 4-weight division champion. In his 53rd professional career bout, he would win the California State Featherweight Championship title, September 13th, 1935, 8-round Technical knockout of Alton Black. Chestnut Street Arena in Reno, Nevada. His 64 professional bout, he would win a Mexican featherweight state California championship title over Mexican's Baby Arizmendi, August 4th, 1936 in Los Angeles, California. They fought in Wrigley's Field. In his 94th professional bout, he would win a New York SAC and a vacant NBA ring championship belt. October 29th, 1937 over Bingham's, Alabama, pt2, who won a New York SAC in the NBA ring bout, becoming the third fighter to win the crown in New York's Madison Square Garden. You see, Armstrong was a legendary fighter as he was fighting. Now, February 26, 1926, the first black world middleweight champion, Theodore Tiger Flowers, defeat Pittsburgh windmill Harry Greb. May 31st, 1938, the fourth black welterweight champion defeats the World Two Division champion, Chicago's Barney Ross, in 15 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden Bowl. August 17, 1938, the second black world lightweight champion defeats world champion Hickmeyer Hurricane, Lou Ambers, in 15 rounds, the New York Madison Square Garden. Referee was Billy Carbonet. Raised the hand of Armstrong, scoring about 8 for Armstrong, 6 for Ambers, 1 round even. The lightweight contender, Henry Armstrong, was vomiting blood because he was warned that if the profusenousness of the blood leaving his mouth would continue, the bout would be stopped. Armstrong pleaded with the referee and said, "Don't worry about it. No more blood will be leaving my mouth." So he would swallow 5 rounds of blood before the bout was over. And 5 rounds was deducted from Armstrong for low blows. Armstrong would now become a 3-weight division champion, holding that title as a black fighter in the peak of racism, 1938. Jim Crow, when he couldn't use the same restroom as a champion, when contenders can go in restrooms where he couldn't go. He couldn't eat in certain restaurants, only in restaurants where he would pay $20 and above. See, Armstrong would hang out at the Cotton Club. The Cotton Club was located on 142nd Street. That name was changed from Clubs Deluxe. Club Deluxe was a restaurant that Jack Johnson had once owned. It was taken over by Alton Madeline. And he changed the name, the Cotton Club. I went over that in prior videos. And that was on 142nd Street. Across the street from there was the Savoy Ballroom. So Armstrong and Joe Louis and many of them would go to those restaurants to eat. They couldn't eat in their downtown Hell's Kitchen area. They can only eat in Harlem, in New York. So Armstrong, to me, was the greatest welterweight champion, defending his title 19 times. It's a record to this day. 5 welterweight championship title defenses, 1939, in October, 1 month alone. He was in there with some of the greatest fighters in history. That's my take on Henry Armstrong, the greatest welterweight champion as a champion of all times. Now, Ray Robinson has the greatest welterweight fighter, pound for pound, meaning he can do it all. Ring generalship, clean punches, defense. The man had it all. Punching power, punch resistance, blocking punches, slipping punches, short range, long range, foot movement. But when it came to Henry Armstrong as a welterweight champion, he's number one. Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott. Ray Robinson. These are men that are in the top 5 as the greatest welterweight champions of all times, in my opinion. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the museum of the forgotten fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. I want to thank everyone for bearing with me. See you in the next video. Be well. Peace.